Today, I'll be speaking on something most of us would have heard of, but I think I can safely say it's not something we know enough about, and that is Braille. At least that's how it's pronounced in English. For the authentic French pronunciation, you'd have to refer to Janus, probably. Braille is a system of encoding information using tactile symbols, so people can decode or read that information by touch. Most Braille readers are members of the blind and visually impaired community, often known, at least in English context, by the initials BVI. Every Braille character or Braille cell is made up of a maximum of 6 dots, arranged in a 2x3 matrix, that is 2 dots across and 3 down. And by raising or embossing dots in different positions, you get 63 different letters and 1 blank. 8-dot Braille has been proposed, but because, well, it gives you more characters, 256 to be precise, but 6-dot Braille still remains the most popular for various reasons. To help you read faster, touch read that is, material in Braille can be encoded in an abbreviated or contracted form. And if a form with no contractions, that is with so-called full spellings, that's usually called grade 1 Braille, whereas if you have abbreviated spellings, it's usually known as a grade 2. Some languages may have multiple levels of or contraction, multiple grades. This is the case in German. The motivation for this talk comes from a recent paper by Robert Engelbretson and colleagues. Engelbretson is a linguist at Rice University in the US. He himself is a member of the blind community, and he's probably best known for creating a Braille version of the IPA. This was back in 2009. Well, he didn't create it from scratch, but he refined a pre-existing version of the IPA that had been neglected for a long time. But in their 2023 paper, Engelbretson and colleagues, they've argued for Braille to be considered, quote, a writing system worthy of study in its own right and on its own terms. So let's see if and how this might be possible based on our current understanding of grapholinguistic concepts. We currently understand writing system to mean, in simple terms, a combination or a pairing of a spoken language on the one hand and a written script on the other hand, where script itself means a collection of symbols or characters, graph inventory. So the Korean language in the Hangul script or the Swahili language in the Latin script, they're both examples of writing systems, a pair of a language and a script. And Korean, Swahili, Italian, Bengali, Mandarin, since all of these languages, these spoken languages can be transcribed or encoded in Braille, it means each of them, when paired with Braille, forms a writing system. You even have Klingon in Braille, by the way. So Braille seems to satisfy the criterion for script quite comprehensively, because of which any language encoded in Braille also satisfies the criteria for a writing system from a theoretical perspective, that is. Peter Daniels had actually expressed this idea that Braille forms or can form an independent writing system, independent of the so-called print version, normally used for that language. He'd expressed this idea almost 30 years ago in the world's writing systems. Since then, interestingly, there's not been that many people who've reiterated this idea explicitly, that Braille can and does constitute a writing system. I also note that most of the people who have are in fact present at this conference. So that's good news. That's as far as script and writing systems go. What about orthography or spelling system? Can we apply this concept to Braille? We do have examples of countries that follow different rules for transcribing the same language in Braille. That is, same language, same script, different spelling rules. Urdu in Braille is written according to very different rules in Pakistan and in India. We'll look at it in more detail slightly later on. English in Braille also, by the way, used to be written slightly differently in the UK and the US until recently. But that was only as far as the abbreviations or contractions were concerned. At the uncontracted level, English and Braille in all countries was written pretty much the same way. On that note, contractions or abbreviations, they are essentially logographic or morphographic in nature, because we are reducing how transparent or phonographic the individual symbols are. This relates to what Keisuke said earlier in the context of Japanese when he spoke of phonographically derived morphography. The same applies to Braille. A contraction is essentially making phonographic writing morphographic or logographic. So not only can writing in Braille appear in different spelling systems, it can also appear in different typological categories, from phonographic on the one hand to logographic and more. Mandarin in Braille, it represents at a basic level syllable onsets and rhymes, just like Mandarin in Popomorpho, which means both these systems are of the same typological category. We usually call them semi-syllabaries or semi-syllabaries if you're from North America, because each symbol in the writing system typically denotes a part of a syllable. Of course, Mandarin in Chinese characters is a logography, while Mandarin in Latin, that is pinyin, that's a phonography. So together, they reinforce our understanding that any language can be written in any script, and the writing systems in question, they don't need to belong to the same typological category. We see this with Mandarin Braille. It aligns with one of the writing systems in question, but not with the others. This aspect is illustrated even more clearly, by the way, when we look at Urdu in Braille. We said earlier that Urdu in Braille has different spelling rules in Pakistan and India. In fact, the two systems belong to different typological categories altogether. In Pakistan, Urdu in Braille is an alpha syllabary because its vowel symbols always have to be bound to another symbol, a consonant symbol, for example. You can see this in the symbols for the schwa vowel, where the hands are pointing. In India, Urdu in Braille is an abugida because it systematically leaves one particular vowel sound unwritten. So, same language, same script, different typological categories. All of this shows that Braille not only behaves just like any so-called visual script, it is actually more versatile than them in many ways, because the writing systems that are founded on Braille, that use Braille as a script, are typologically very diverse. And probably the best example of this versatility is that of Japanese and Braille. Here's the quote from Keisuke Honda again, where he says, Japanese and Braille has different formal and functional properties from its visual counterpart. No argument there. I mean, that is a robust statement to make. The question, I suppose, and the trickier, stickier question is, how do we use those formal and functional properties to interpret and apply our findings to decide what category Japanese in Braille belongs to typologically? At first glance, 6-dot cell in Japanese in Braille seems to indicate a spoken syllable, just like, say, hiragana or katakana. But if we look closer within the cell, it is possible to identify specific dots that correspond to a vowel sound in particular, and other dots that indicate a consonant sound, which of course seems quite alphabetic. So does this mean Japanese and Braille is an alphabet of sorts? Just that it packs or compresses vowel and consonant symbols into the same visual or graphetic block, which, by the way, is a lot like Korean in Hangul. Clearly, this is something worth researching in more detail. I, for one, would be very interested to know more about what all this means for its typological classification. But for now, we can safely say that not only is there overwhelming evidence, I would say, that Braille is a full-fledged script in the grapholinguistic sense, it's in fact so versatile, it actually helps us refine our theories, and not just graphomatic theories, but also sociolinguistic ones, because, well, there's at least 100 languages worldwide that are written in Braille. I have a feeling ScriptSource actually had a larger number on their website not too long ago. They seem to have trimmed it down. But either way, it is a fairly large number, and this number includes all the major world languages, which means all these languages are effectively biscriptal. They are written in their visual or print script and in Braille. To my knowledge, there's no language that is written only in Braille. So it means any language that is transcribed in Braille is necessarily biscriptal. So the stereotype, the common belief that writing a language in more than one script is somehow unusual or remarkable, that idea becomes harder to justify. Braille forces us to refine our thinking and our narrative around that notion of biscriptality being unusual. This also means that Braille is apparently the only script common to all major European languages, which is nice because Braille was, after all, invented in Europe exactly 200 years ago. So it's a good occasion, I suppose, to renew our interest in Braille, of course, together with researchers and members of the blind community. So I'll look forward to future research on that, and for now, any questions you might have. Thank you.
Questions?
It's kind of striking that Pakistan, which doesn't have an abugida, ended up with a Braille that is an abugida, and India sort of did things in a different way. Do you know anything about how they managed to swap writing systems, essentially, or class of writing systems?
I think it's the opposite. In fact, it's Pakistan that has the alpha syllabary and India that has the abugida. It's not Actually, that's surprising because if you accept that Urdu in the Arabic script, or for that matter, most languages written in the Arabic script, they could actually be classified as alpha syllabaries. And this too is an old idea. I think Bill Bright was one of the first to express it back in 1999. Amalia reiterated it a few years ago, and so did I last year. From that point of view, it's not too surprising that Pakistan ended up with this alpha syllabic version of Urdu and Braille. I suppose what's more interesting is how India ended up with the Abughidic version of Urdu and Braille is not so surprising, but the Indian version, which is an Abugida, is not an alpha syllabary. I deliberately left that dimension out for reasons of time, but the way Urdu and Braille and other South Asian languages are written in Braille in India and in Nepal, Sri Lanka, and so on. They're a very interesting case of writing systems that are Abugidas but not alpha syllabaries. And I think therein lies the interesting bit. So I might not have answered your original question. In fact, I might have completely negated it, but I hope the answer still offers some food for thought.
Thank you. I have so many questions. Firstly, do you think the Braille orthography in terms of the contractions affects how people understand the language, or is that just a feature of multiscriptality more generally? Because words are chunked in different ways to how they're pronounced, at least in spoken English. And also, does the fact that this enforces one script on so many different languages affect how people who use Braille understand their culture when they're not involved with the script sighted readers?
Ooh, it's a very multi-layered question, right? I'll try and go through each point one by one. As far as the contractions go, at least in the context of English, first of all, not every Braille writing system, Braille-based writing system around the world uses contractions. There's actually a limited number because you have to either allow enough time for those contractions to emerge organically and then also undergo standardization organically, and obviously that takes time. In most cases, the contractions have been imposed top down. And of course, that requires a dedicated official body and so on. So it's not surprising it's only happened in a few countries. I don't think the contractions per se would create a problem. They, like any logographic writing system, will be hard to learn, but once you learn it, this quite efficient to use. I think this goes back to what Noah spoke about as well, about the potential advantages of logographic writing, including polyvalent writing. The culture bit, I think, is really hard to answer. So if you don't mind, I'll avoid answering it directly. I'll chicken out on that. But if I remember correctly, you did say something about sighted readers of Braille. Would you mind repeating that?
It was more about sighted readers using a different script, which is tied to their cultural identity, and Braille users are excluded from that.
I think that too is something we really won't be able to do justice to. I will, however, point to something in my last slide, assuming my screen is still visible. Let me try and, there we go. So when Bulgaria joined the European Union in 2007, I think it was, the next series of Euro notes were promptly updated to include the word euro or euro in the Cyrillic script. Braille, despite being the only script that is common to all European languages, does not appear on the euro banknotes. which from a sighted person's point of view is actually quite curious because you think that, oh, it's my identity, it should be on the script, and that blind people or the people in the BVI community should feel the same way. But we know that the European Central Bank has consulted with blind organizations, and I'm not sure, but I imagine the blind community would have, not would have either said so explicitly or not brought up the topic at all about, introducing the letters EURO in Braille onto Euro banknotes. So the question is more about, I guess, do sighted people worry more about their culture, not so much, I'm very deliberately using the word worry or, agonize over it. Whereas, blind and visually impaired people, are they perhaps more pragmatic about it? That they're more concerned with practical aspects of the euro banknote in this case, and not so much about, the visual displays of script and, by extension, culture. I might not have answered your question directly, but I do hope that offers some food for thought. Again?
I have a question online on the writing support. So, great talk, Arvind, regarding Braille typology. Do you have thoughts on how we should incorporate its different relation with the production side of written language, since handwriting Braille is, as far as I understand, far less common than handwriting visual scripts?
I would be very interested to see how anyone is even able to handwrite Braille. It also struck me when I was watching Helen's talk that what she described, that beautiful calligraphy and Braille, they're sort of like two ends of the spectrum, right? One's a series of like flowing lines, and the other is literally a bunch of dots. But they're both perfectly suited to their respective user bases, their respective audiences. If you look at Braille in a little more detail, you'll realize that, that 6-dot matrix, why it's so popular, because it fits perfectly under your fingertip. And that's part of the reason why 8-dot Braille has not become popular, because your finger becomes less sensitive as you move away from the tip. Because it was meant to be primarily read, or read more than written, it's in that sense not surprising that we don't see much discussion about handwriting Braille. Having said that, there is obviously a lot to uncover over there. For starters, should we even look at this? Because we're sort of assuming that no one handwrites Braille, right? I myself am realizing as I speak that I sort of presumed, yeah, of course, no one writes Braille by hand. And as I said that, I was like, wait a minute, but what if someone does? So perhaps from even from the perspective of acting as a prompt to look into it further, it is definitely a promising avenue for research.
I have a question. So, being that Braille characters are only 6 dots, it should be easy to calculate through information theory the complexity and perplexity of the script in different languages. But my question is, since you mentioned the fingertip, is the fingertip more sensitive on some sides? So are the upper dots easier readable between quotes than the lower dots, or is it perfectly symmetric?
That seems to be the general opinion. It's not the only reason. The fact that your fingertip tends to become less sensitive as it moves away from the tip, partly because you're moving towards the first knuckle, the first joint. So apparently there's fewer nerve endings over there. So that, is part of the reason. But part of the reason, I guess, is also just, you're used to reading 6-dot Braille. So Suddenly to move to 8-dot Braille, it would, in a sense, be like a spelling change, an orthography reform. And we know how sighted people react to orthography reform. There's no reason to believe that Braille users would be much different. Yes, they might be more pragmatic, perhaps, as I mentioned in the context of the Euro notes, not explicitly wanting the letters EURO on the banknotes. But it's also true that in the context of English and Braille, when the Braille associations of the UK and the US were trying to unify their practices, there was a lot of resistance in the community. So that community resistance is, I'm sure, also plays a part in why 8-dot Braille has not become as popular. Anecdotally, what I've seen is that people who are in favor of 8-dot Braille tend to be sighted people, sighted readers of Braille, and not blind readers of Braille, which also might suggest something because, as a sighted reader of Braille, I read it with my eyes. So when you ask me that question, is it true that the fingertip actually becomes less sensitive? The honest answer is I don't know, because I've hardly ever tried to read Braille with my fingers. It's almost always visually. So yeah, sorry about that, Yanis, but now I think I shall go up. I shall go and onto Google Scholar and look up more about that.
Yes,
Could I
last
add a
question.
comment on that? There is a book on haptics from MIT Press that covers the point of sensitivity about the Braille cell. And also, Braille handwriting is really common. I do it all the time.
Very interesting. Okay, I think we should, I should get in touch with you about this. I would be very interested to know more.
So thank you very much, Arvind.